live? Oh, there we are. Hey, we're live. Let's see here. All right. How you doing, Nathan?
Well, thanks for having me, Mason. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, you and I have been on a lot of different Zoom calls. We've talked about all sorts of stuff. I think on our last Zoom call, we were talking about the app marketplace. And I was thinking, well, with the launch, it'd be great to, you know, continue that conversation. And yeah, just like I think it's a big inflection point within, Webflow's development. So I think we've got some people that are going to be joining just in the comments, and I think as people are coming along, we'll give them just a second. We've got Jack, who's in the background, so he'll be helping kind of manage the comments. But as people are tuning in, maybe Nathan, I could just ask you, what'd you have for lunch?
Really good question. Yeah, so it was an unusual day, lunch-wise, out here in rural North Carolina, where I'm streaming live from. A good friend of ours, a couple moved to San Diego a couple of years ago, and the man was back in town to visit family, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood. Can I bring you and your wife lunch?" And I'm never going to turn down a free meal. They say there's no such thing as a free meal. I got one
Yeah.
today. We'll see exactly what the ask is later, maybe from him. He's buttering us up. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
So he brought us a terrific spread, and boy, that was a nice way to spend an afternoon.
That's awesome. What do you bring you?
It was from a cafe. There was like a grilled cheese. There was some like potato latke, which is like a potato pancake. There was some quiche. There was some scones and cookies. It was a whole spread. It was terrific.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
I'm terribly sorry to bore our visitors here with lunch plans. I'd be curious. So Mason, why don't you describe how it is that we end up working together so much? Like, why is it that we are collaborating so frequently? I'm sure people would be curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And see a couple people in the comments over here. Hey, Meg, good to see you. Meg's been working with the launch of all of this. And Adrian, oh gosh, we're getting, this is like the most comments I think we've had on a YouTube in a while. Maybe I'm just, but yeah, so Nathan, you and I work together on the enterprise team. So, just as there's larger organizations that are looking to come onto the Webflow platform and then trying to create solutions. So you're kind of creating solutions, maybe like a solution plan. If I'm like listening to the customer, and then we're more on like how that can be executed, whether other technologies, like, I don't know, I think you and I have gone back and forth a lot. How did you come to Webflow?
We both have strong opinions. And actually, just before I answer that, I'll piggyback and say, certainly Edgar Allan predates Webflow's enterprise motion. And so for a lot of product-led companies like Webflow, it sells itself. People just love it, word spreads and things. And so, but when it turns out that someone loves Webflow, brings it to a large organization, and there's lots of people working in the tool, once you get to a certain scale of usage, then the needs change a little bit. And so that's sort of the enterprise offering at Webflow. And because Edgar Allan, it goes without saying, I'm sure for the folks on this call, is one of our top enterprise partners, you've been building in Webflow for clients for a long time. And then with enterprise coming along, now you're also doing some of these enterprise deals. And you can speak also to some of those differences in needs once you get to a certain kind of scale. And a lot of the work that Edgar Allan does is a model for a lot of our listeners. In fact, we have a podcast that Matthew does here at Webflow. He's on the community team, and he'll post, oh, this week I spoke with so-and-so, and these are topics, whatever. And there's a little thing that says inspiration. And everyone who builds in Webflow has their favorite Webflow celebrities. And I would just venture to say that whenever it says the people that inspire me, for the last 10 of these in a row, Edgar Allan and or Mason is on the list. So thanks for all that you do and for being such a great partner and collaborator.
Well, thanks. It's interesting. So I've been in the agency business for 23 years now, which is kind of like forever. And you've been building the internet since 99, which I love that on your LinkedIn bio. Also, if you don't follow Nathan on LinkedIn, you should. He makes LinkedIn way less cringy That's the only, like, I think you've brought your you've brought your whole whole personality to LinkedIn, which doesn't always happen. But yeah, we actually started working in Webflow because I was tired of delivering red lines to enterprise clients for AEM builds. And I was like, gosh, this isn't that hard. Like, we're just building the internet. We're just building, this is stuff that I've been doing since, before the .com bust. Like, we should have a better way of doing this. And our team adopted a Webflow to just build those designs, be able to take it around to stakeholders, show them what it looked like in the browser. And then we were like, export the code. Okay, now you can go in and cobble that together with whatever horrible system, CMS that you're working with. And I'm not going to name names, but AEM is at the top of my list, and so is Sitecore. Like, those are the ones that I really hate.
You won't name names except for that one, yeah.
Except for those names,
two, but it rhymes with Schmadobe, right? Okay.
Yeah.
No, well, there's lots of tools out there, and of course, I myself was a longtime Webflow user and advocate before joining the company, so it's sort of a dream job for me is to help other people become unblocked. And so my role as a front-end developer on the enterprise sales team is, what are some of those specific needs? What are the ways that the workflows exist in these organizations now? And what will it mean once we translate to Webflow in terms of making their lives easier, faster, better, these kinds of things. And so it's a real delight to kind of show people all of these ways that you've been struggling. You don't have to struggle anymore. And so it's a real pleasure getting to kind of be a part of those transformations. But so I guess just to follow up that question, I was a longtime admirer, fan of the company, and saw there was an opening and didn't officially know what a solutions engineer was when I first applied, but the job description sounded like me, and so it worked out pretty well. But yeah, that's basically
what do you do as a solutions engineer? It's a great title.
so it's a lot of syllables for a very simple idea. So we have the salespeople who are extremely skilled, and they are people who have sold all kinds of SaaS products or physical products, and enterprise account executives that come from whatever background they come from, but are not necessarily very technically minded, like not web makers themselves, and or don't have like a strong Webflow product expertise. And so the SEs, the solutions engineers, are brought in as kind of like subject matter experts during the deal cycle to answer questions, technical questions, unblock, do actual product demonstrations. So it's like, here's how you can do all the things that you want to be doing. When they have questions about how do we do X, how do we do Y, how do we do Z in Webflow, we draw on our experience with other customers to be like, oh, this is typically like a best practice for organizations in terms of doing this. And so we sort of are there for the technical validation part, like, can Webflow do what we need it to do? And then, yes or no, and then we can move on to kind of other security issues or, legal kinds of things like that. Sure. But yeah, that's the role we play.
It's, I think, a great kind of like description of what your role is around, like, can Webflow do this thing that I'm asking? And then this idea of a new surface, or kind of like the web app marketplace, where now, like, if there's not that ability, then there is that ability to now build on top of Webflow. And it's amazing because, if we look back just within the last year, I think Webflow has been shipping so much, and it's really, really incredible. And there's all these quality of life features, but there's just never enough time. There's so much to build and so many of these edge cases. And for years, I feel like I've just been like, put me in the game, coach. Like, we're ready to build. Like, we want to build in an official way. We've actually been building products, alongside of Webflow, but just trying to be able to have like some access. And now that there is that access, that's what's like super exciting. So, for example, HubSpot integration, that's something that gets talked about a whole lot. And now that there can be like a HubSpot integration app, like, there's a lot of ways to be able to integrate HubSpot, but to have what I would say is like a clear lane, I think it just, it starts to address a lot of those like what about questions, like, well, what about this? What about this? Anything that you're seeing or thinking about as it relates to just kind of the extendability of the platform?
Yeah, what a terrific question, and what a great segue that it's almost like you planned that from the early part of the conversation.
And for anyone that knows, like, was last night, and Nathan was like, "What are we talking about tomorrow?" And I was like, "We're talking about the App Store." And so
Mason, you're not
like,
supposed to disclose
okay,
that.
well, I just it's like we're buttoned up, but we're not like super buttoned up here.
No, we just said it's gonna be like a casual chat. Pretend like we're just talking, and there happens to be dozens of other people, watching and listening. So, but thanks all of you for joining and welcome. Yeah, no, it's to your point. A website like a I'll just use the word pro website for lack of a better word. Like, let's make a distinction between a brochure site or a presence site, like your business card on the web kind of thing, where it's like, oh, I'm a restaurant. I just need like hours and phone number and menu. Like it never changes or rarely changes, these kinds of things. Legal, like a law firm, those kinds of things. Like that's one kind of class. And Webflow has historically, been serving that need. There's a lot of people in that market that also go after that. But I think that where the rubber really meets the road, especially for us as service providers, so like implementers of the software on behalf of clients, we need tools that can help center the website in the larger ecosystem of tools that need to be used. And so for a lot of our customers, your website is not just a brochure site, it's a lead generating tool, it's a brand awareness tool, it's an editorial driven tool, and so you obviously need to have the flexibility to do the kinds of publishing you want to do, which is words and pictures on a screen. But beyond that, the constellation of things that support that central kind of effort are things like HubSpot. So you've got your marketing automation. And when I talk with enterprise customers, it's like, well, here's my list of dependencies. And you've got a CRM like Salesforce, you've got HubSpot, marketing automation, you've got segmented analytics with segment.com, you've got Hotjar for heat maps, you've got e-commerce, you've got mail newsletters, you've got, just the list goes on and on and on. You've got your DAM, like your digital asset manager. And so part of the challenge and the opportunity then is, we can integrate those things with Webflow now, but can we make it easier? Can we kind of expose an opportunity for our collaborators to kind of deliver those experiences at a higher, more polished level? And so HubSpot's a really good example. So very pleased with the launch. The team has been working really hard and just exceptional all around. But the initial launch was, and forgive me, the numbers exactly don't hold me, it's like 20 initial launch partners, and it's just growing much faster. But HubSpot is one of the premier launch ones, and we worked very closely with the HubSpot team. They were super excited, very thrilled to be featured in this way. And previously, HubSpot would basically be like, I can iframe in a form, or I can include some JavaScript at the bottom of the page, and it's fine. It's like a lot of times customers ask me, how do I do this with Webflow? Well, the short answer is, you however you would do it not with Webflow is how you'll do it with Webflow, because it's just HTML and CSS. But the fact that this new, and to use your word that I love, this new surface that has been exposed now allows developers to integrate these other tools more tightly than they've been able to do before. And that results in a better experience for the customer, the company, the people actually building it. And so that's sort of the new frontier that we're looking at, and really thrilling.
Yeah. I think for us as a business, what we've looked at, and it's like Edgar Allen, like we're a 10-year-old agency. We've been working in services, but we actually didn't start to be a service-based company. Like that was always going to be the core, but the bigger picture was like, how can we go and build products that we can own, and how can we go in and be basically like let the services layer be an incubator to a product layer that can then be a stabilizing layer, and then that can create a virtuous cycle. I have this idea, like it's been coming together recently, around how, I don't know, Webflow with this launch of the app marketplace, like, yes, we've launched Slater. I'll talk about that a little bit. I can talk about, on April 1st, I posted a tweet, which was like, hey, after 10 years of services, we're moving into product. That's always been the plan. But, I also just, it's a great, like anything you post on, April 1st, April Fools or whatever, to like, are they serious or are they not? And it's like, no, we're very, very serious. But I would say at the same time, like, we're not walking away from our services work. If anything, I feel like when I'm looking at products, like we're looking at kind of like a vertical integration of product and service. And I think especially with the launch, like with all of these AI tools, what I see is that and Webflow has been like this for a while, but like all of a sudden tools can provide like this exponential amount of power to users, but human ability only grows incrementally. And so for customer adoption, you have what I'd say is this opportunity gap, which means that for all of a sudden you have these, like, you've had superpowers with Webflow for a while now, how to be able to have like enablement with those to be able to get to the end goal, which is not to build a website, as you were saying, but to build a set of marketing tools. And so for that company, like we're actually configuring a set of marketing tools. And it's, I think, just so exciting to see all of these groups that are building so much around the platform. Everything from like, Nelson's launched Hyophilia, FinSuite's been just doing this forever. Like everything that they've launched, like I think they actually kind of hacked the browser early on, and we won't say, that should not be in, like, I know that's not officially endorsed, but I think it at least set a horizon line for maybe what was going to be possible. And but starting to see almost like, we've talked, Webflow a lot has talked about like the democratization of the web, and for a while that's thought about as like a democratization of actually building for the web. But something that I've been getting excited about is like a democratization for how to build companies that build on the web. Because for a long time, the only way to really start, like to have a startup, was to go and get VC funding. And now it's almost like within the services layer that we all do, that we can, we can work, do client work, and then find a gap within that client work, and then start to build a product around that, and then still and be on our own treadmill. Like that's for Edgar Allen, like what we want to be is like, we want to build an exceptional team. We want to do exceptional work, but we don't want to have the necessarily like pressure of like, oh, we've got to exit in 5 years, right? Or we've got to 10x. I love having a lifestyle business. I've got a great lifestyle, like no lie. But I think it's just it's opened up a lot with just, I think, different ways of looking at building the web. And also, man, we've got a ton of questions and activity here in the comments. So Dylan, Adrian, let's see, I saw it was Keith is in here, just like so many people, so many great conversations. Jack, who's in the background, maybe you can go in and we'll talk about this just a little bit more. And then if we wanted to address, maybe here's one from Dylan. Question about WebflowApps: will it be like WordPress where anyone can upload a plugin, or will it be more comparable to like the Apple App Store, where the apps must be kind of abide strict policies? So I'm going to be respectful of your kind of relationship with Webflow, Nathan, but you can keep me honest. And our experience within the App Store is that there are guidelines, there's approvals. You can't just do anything. And so I see it more like the Apple App Store, which there is like we had to go through QA. We had to, there's ways in which we're interacting with the API. And it is like a curated list, which I think is right. On the one hand, it's great to be able to grant access to anyone, but as it is a platform, like a literal platform in which, there is visibility to different apps, that you want to have a really great experience for that end customer. Nathan, anything you want to add there, or Dylan? I hope that,
Yeah, I can maybe just a little bit of color. So I think if you had to find an analogy, the closer analogy would be iOS versus Android. And I'll just describe the way that it is now. So to be in the Webflow app marketplace, you'll submit it, and it is reviewed by Webflow team member before, if it's published. And there are some, and I'm not totally clear. Like the best thing to do would be to talk with the DevRel team inside the forum, because we have a new tab now in the forum, and you can ask all these kinds of questions and get like answers directly from the DevRel team. And so I won't speak for them or for Webflow in general, but just my understanding is that, it's going to be vetted before approved. And that's, for all the reasons that you'd want to make sure it's high quality, it's written well, it's useful, it's not malicious, these kinds of things. And what's nice, though, is that because of that model, because of that approach, there's some advantages that kind of iOS model versus, let's just say, the Android model. Again, pros and cons, both valuable for different reasons.
We can have that philosophical conversation later.
Yeah. But in our case, one of the advantages, or one of the approaches I think that it will be useful and valuable to our users is, like in other contexts and other kinds of platforms that have plugins, it's sort of up to the user to update those plugins in the same way that it might be up to the user to update the main platform, the main software. Well, Webflow is, of course, always updated automatically, invisibly in the background. There's no downtime. It's just every time you log into Webflow, it's the newest version of Webflow. You get all the features, and same thing with the plugins. We call them apps because it's more of that model. I think that said, you can look in the developer documents and see that anybody can build one. So like you can build one for yourself to do anything you want, and you could potentially share it. You wouldn't have like a distribution mechanism like a store, but in that sense, you could like make things for yourself and share them with other, like your clients, for example, perhaps. So in that respect, there's no like formal mechanism for distributing it, but there are ways. And again, I would direct you to the DevRel. So in that respect, if you were like, I want to just make my own and I don't care about it being vetted for approval, I can just make my own and use it. And so in some respects, again, I don't want to speak for the DevRel team, but it's sort of like the best of both worlds in that respect. Because you can sort of get it to do whatever you want, and it's going to be safe.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Let's say if you're working with a client and they had something that they wanted to have is maybe it's like a proprietary configuration or things along those lines, you can actually build that in the app framework on that surface layer, but then
using
only
APIs,
distribute it to. Wow, that opens up like so many doors there. Let's say you're running like a big publishing type of site or things along those lines, and you had something that you wanted to be very specific to that authoring, that you could go in and start to extend that.
Yeah, and it's not something that is sort of like formally discussed from like a comms perspective, but we're always improving, like the API updates that just came out, the huge updates that we can talk about. We're like a necessary foundation to do this app work, but it really still is just the beginning. Like it's never just like set it and forget it, our APIs are done. There's still plenty of room for growth. But I think the other advantage too that I'll mention for like this particular approach is, we mentioned the updating part and the vetting for high quality, but also it's in a separate runtime. So when you're using a Webflow app, it's not kind of like running on the same instance. So if that were ever to crash or do something, it would never like take down your whole site. And if you've worked in other platforms, other ecosystems, you know that there's some times where I update a plugin and it takes the whole system down because they're like very tightly meshed. So that kind of long-term experience is more advantageous, I think.
That's really wild. I didn't realize it worked in a separate runtime. Probably Jared knows that, who's, it's like I'm on the sales team. So like I know enough to be dangerous. And Dylan, you're also asking, will we ever be able to make apps that change the designer UI? I don't know specifically, but I know that like I love there's the table component that recently came out, and I imagine like, looking at ways to start to like layer on top of that UI. And so that's probably a better question for Jared. Nathan, I don't know if you know anything specifically that's already launched or live that I'm kind of glossing over there.
Yeah, meaning, do you want Jared to chime in, or do you want me to?
No. I like we'll have to have Jared answer that separately later. But I didn't know if you know of anything where you can impact you couldn't go like today, for example, create like a zebra stripe skin for your Webflow designer. Like you remember like Winamp, and they had all the skins.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
For anyone kind of old school internet, AOL 1999 type of thing.
What was that audio clip when you opened it up? Something about, I forget. There's always this one like guy speaking anytime you open up Winamp or something like that. As soon as you open it up, but yes, very very fond of the Winamp days. So nothing like that exists. For better for worse, the UI is kind of delivered. I will say though that just to be clear, that of the APIs that were just launched, and it was we now have a Forms API, a Custom Code API, an Updated Pages API, and an Assets API. In addition to that, those are all kind of like backend kind of things, like exchanging information, passing data, communicating with other servers. But a fifth API that was also launched is the Designer Extensions API. And so this was a way to kind of formalize or sanction some of the kind of third-party tools that developers were doing that you could install like as Google Chrome extensions, that kind of thing. And it wouldn't necessarily like change the UI, but it does allow you to act on the canvas in certain ways. And so some of those that we're seeing, like, so for example, one that is both a third part, like a connection to a data source, and that acts on the designer canvas with the Unsplash app that just came out. And of course, if you're looking for assets, you're going to probably go to Unsplash, find something. Well, the fact that you can just load that extension or that new app, and then you load it in the browser window, so you're able to surface information from another data source, in this case Unsplash, and you're actually able to drag that onto the canvas and use it as an image right there. And so that's sort of like you're like interfacing with the tool directly from like a front end perspective, whereas historically apps are more kind of like, back end stuff. So I would say, that if you're curious about that and you really want to see what you can do, then again, talk with our developer relations team and look up that new Designer Extensions API on our developers.webflow.com website, because I think that's like, we've only scratched the surface of that. You can talk, I think, maybe how Slater works with that as well. And then I can also just say the FinSuite table, another good example of interacting directly on the canvas using that new Designer Extension API is a good example.
Yeah. With Slater, one of the great things is that we can do a code injection directly into Webflow. So there's two ways in which you can add code from Slater into Webflow. One is go and grab, kind of copy and paste the code link into Webflow. And then the other is like, once you pair a Webflow project with a Slater project, then like automatically that code gets kind of like injected into Webflow on publish. One of the things that's not there is, and I don't believe it's going to be there for a little while, it's a hot swap. So with Slater today, you can go in and take that code and like copy and paste and put it in there, publish once, and then just work in Slater and like do everything you want to do from a JavaScript perspective without having to go through a full publish cycle within Webflow. And I think that's a really great workflow, but with the code injection, that code actually only goes out once you do a full publish from Webflow. So it's like and I think it really speaks to two different scenarios. Like, hey, if you just have to go in and like you're adding maybe like, I don't know, Google tracking, or like you just have a set of scripts that, and we're going to be launching the library. So if you have a set of scripts that you are just using all the time, like you can go and add those. And then when you're ready for that final and full publish, like you don't have to copy or paste anything. It's a very smooth transition. I think if you're working on something that's more iterative, then that's where, because we were really hoping that that there'd be the linking and the hot swap, but that hot swap only happens on publishing. But you can go and still link, have that page open, and then just kind of like fiddle to your heart's content until like maybe you get that script right without having to go back through a full publish cycle. So anyway, that's super detailed and nerdy, but.
Well, so I think that's good. What I think might be valuable, and this was interesting for me when we'd spoken earlier, was I'd be curious to hear from you specifically what problem Slater aims to solve, like what itch that you were scratching internally and again, like our Webflow community members who are developing in Webflow are finding like, oh, I wish that this existed or this existed. And so it's not unusual to then kind of create a solution with the new apps marketplace. It's sort of a way to formalize that and like spread it to other people and get some more exposure. But I'm curious, number one, what did you create Slater for? Like what particular thing were you hoping to solve in terms of like your workflow process with Webflow? And then number two, what that process was like in terms of getting this separate tool then brought into like how easy, how hard, what challenges? Because I think there's probably some folks on the call that are thinking like, I might want to try my hand at developing an app, like what that experience was like and kind of how that went. What would you say?
Yeah. So a bit of background is, as I said, like we built Edgar Allan to build products. We've been building products for the last 4 years. Slater is our first, what I'd say is like public product, and where we've had a lot of traction. We've made the mistake of building a product internally and then not releasing it to the world, and then finding out that like the a larger customer base that it isn't going to work with. And with Slater was actually the opposite, where we built it internally and then released it while we were still like very uncomfortable with all of its bumps and bruises, which I think is like that's the right approach when we've built it with the community. Slater grew out of ultimately Letter Run. So last year we were like, oh, let's really push what can be done with Webflow. I love Webflow, and I love the ability to have, like, as a designer, to work within a design tool. At the same time, I come from Flash development, where you could have very very technical people and like very non-technical people working in the same environment. And with Letter Run, I was like, I want to recreate that. Like, how can we go in and not just try to have developers, like traditional developers, learn how to work with the visual editor, but how can we go and have like kind of like we as a company, we try to work from what I'd say is like a strength-based type of approach, which means like what's your strength. So if you're really good at writing code, like that's what you should be doing. Or if you're really good at kerning type, like that's what you should do. And we were able to do it. We had just like people that never touched the Webflow interface, building very complicated 3JS world spinning around type of stuff. And then people that like all they did is work in Webflow, and they kerned the type on the menu and the pop-ups, and like how like the intro would happen and all this type of stuff. I got a lot of gray hair from that project. It was one of these, and I talked to that, we were able to go and get quick wins. Yeah, totally. Like it was Flash and ActionScript. Like I had the, that intro to ActionScript book, and I would just take that and go through like one chapter a day type of thing. And this was back, I was listening to like Radiohead and just grinding away.
Yeah. I did the same thing at a Borders that was nearby my house, and I was
totally
too broke to have a car. So I rode my bike to the Borders, and you could actually just read the Flash books in the Borders without having to buy it. So I would go in, read a chapter, go home, come back, read a chapter, because I couldn't afford a book. Come on.
Yeah. But anyway, so I had that kind of that working scenario in mind, and then like gosh, it was just miserable. Like trying to go in and have because you've got to have a coding environment, you've got to have a staging environment, a production environment. You're pushing stuff around, and it was just really, really cumbersome. And at the same time, we do a lot of projects, and like Webflow is great, but I actually campaigned. For anyone that would listen, I was like, I am not a fan of Visual Logic as it relates to Webflow, and also I think memberships should not be something that Webflow focuses on, and that should be a surface that gets built so that other companies could come into the space. I don't know if they actually listen to me, but I am noisy. But back to the story here is that we just built a tool to be able to solve that problem around how we could build technical and how we could bring technical and non-technical teams into one environment, and then be able to manage all the different little code snippets that would be out there. Because that's the other thing, is like managing code inside of Webflow today is miserable. Like you can go and have one little component here that has some code in it, and maybe you have some code that's on a page, and like good luck finding anything. Good luck going in and debugging something. Good luck just like there's no way to look at documentation. Like you just can't go and open up a Webflow file and have like a README for like, oh, well, this goes here and this goes here. So we wanted to have like that kind of traditional like approach where you could have everything in one place and then be able to manage that through one code snippet. We started building that. Jared built the first prototype within a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden, like, the world kind of woke up to AI, and we're like, oh my gosh, we can start to prompt a lot of our JavaScript. And so then we added that prompting layer into Slater, which wasn't called Slater at the time. It was just called like Jared's project. And then started to see how, really like, I mean, our thesis is kind of trying to bring like no code to no code, both like building a bridge between like those that are working visually and those that are like traditional developers, and how they can come together. And we've got some great updates that we're working on right now. The two that I'm very excited about that I'll preview is, one is called Notebook. So Notebook is just where, instead of having your code and having your prompting layer, you'll have a tab where that code will be kind of behind the scenes, but you can just go in and write out almost the comments of what you would want to happen, and then do like prompt, and then it automatically is creating that code behind the scenes, so you don't even have to like drag it over. It's just there. And the second is called tables. So basically it's a table view, so you could go and look at your variables from your JavaScript and your variables from Webflow, and then start to match those up. So if you have a slider that you use all the time, drag that out from the library and be able to say like, oh, here's my left arrow, my right arrow, my back, here's where my slides are going to go, and then just connect those to Webflow. So it's either a visual element or a collection element. But that's all stuff that kind of came out of, again, internal projects, like how we're working. And then now, we started working on this back in December. I didn't know the App Store was really going to be coming out. Like, it really wasn't like, it's amazing to go back in and look at like, what are the things that everyone was really excited about at WebflowConf last year. And it just shows you how quickly things change, or like what was really talked about. DevRail or DevLink is also one that like we've been digging into. I see like huge opportunities, especially on the enterprise space for that. And we've got a couple different projects in which we're talking about helping like 100+ teams adopt that. So that's one to keep an eye on. But just looking back now at like the app's surface layer, such a huge like inflection point to now being able to add like all of these things that I think would have taken way longer if it was just being built internally. So anyway, that's the long story around like how we kind of like came to this, but it was to scratch our own itch. And then now again, it's helping us with like learning how to be a product shop. Like, I don't like, you hear all this stuff, like fancy stuff, like go to market and like, what's your cost of acquisition, cost of customer acquisition, CAC, and all of this stuff, which like I know about by working with SaaS-based companies, but we haven't really lived it. So that's what's really exciting.
That's I think the maybe the canonical example of a services company that shifts to products would probably be 37 Signals. So if you're familiar with this crew, they were a web dev shop way back in the day, very successful blog, wrote a couple of books, and then in a similar way was struggling with managing their client work, in terms of notes and files and emails. And so originally Basecamp was created just to scratch their own itch and to use that tool to make their client work that much more successful. And of course, the rest is history. They became a company, released a couple of their products, but ultimately kind of just standardized on Basecamp. But that's the dream, I guess, right? It's like if you're a services company, it's feast or famine. You're always hustling to get that deal. And if you have product revenue, it's that kind of consistent recurring monthly. And like you said, there's a virtuous cycle there where maybe the products that you release become sufficiently popular that then your services business picks up and vice versa and stuff. So it's nice to diversify your portfolio a little bit. I think if you're a pure services company, and there's plenty that do that really well. I had a go of it for about 6 or 7 years, and had a similar thought of like, I bet going into product would be really would be nice. But it wasn't meant to be. But I love that. And the same way that Slater is scratching that itch for you, and there's other tools that, like you said, you've done and released internally. And then just to mention FinSuite again, like the attributes approach, this table app that they've released, the same kind of thing where it's like, we build in Webflow all the time, and here's the ways that it makes us better and more successful. And if there's a formal way to share those with the wider community, then everybody wins. And so that's been a big part of this app's launch is how do we make Webflow more than just the best tool for doing visual web development, but can we actually make it as fully extensible as possible, so that there are, you know, fewer limitations and frustrations.
And I think, you know, just to call out as well, like the member stack team, I think they were one of the first groups that actually made an official like Webflow focused app. But they started off as well. They were just doing Webflow development, and they kind of noticed there wasn't a memberships option inside of Webflow. Whale Sync, same type of thing. Someone was doing a project, Webflow project, looked up a video. I can't remember. I've met him. He's super nice. I apologize for not remembering his name. But looked up a video from Connor, and it was like an hour-long video around like how to sync Airtable and Webflow. And it was like, it's got to be easier than this. And it was it's a really, really well done video. If you haven't gone back and watched that, I mean, he's just done so many really great videos. But, you know, that was one of these where it's like, oh, you know, let's shorten the distance from instead of an hour to now like 2 minutes. And, you know, it's just all of these opportunities that I think that are out there to start to diversify, like what that portfolio of the business is going to look like. And, you know, also to just like throw out there, it's going to take a while. So, as I'm thinking about building a bridge to build a rocket ship, that you know, we're like right now we're at like 16 paying customers, which is amazing, but it's a long way to go to be able to get to profitability. And so we're still going to be doing, you know, a lot of services work, but we have been now focusing in on just like we have a team that is focused on product. And, you know, the other numbers, and we're going to start to put these in our weekly email. I think we have 750 around there, like, you know, people that are using Slater, and then daily actives, it's like 120, something along those lines. So like a really, like, and I also want to thank the Webflow community for just being gracious, because we're figuring a lot of this stuff out, and we're getting such great feedback. We've been building with the Webflow community, you know, really since probably March, April, like where we started like sending it out to a limited number of people, and just like all the features that we have in for what I would say is like our V1 launch, which is still, we're going back into doing like a design update. Those were all a result of people that have, you know, worked with us, been kind of like feedback, understanding of some of the hard edges and all the feedback.
Yeah, and that's it makes me really happy to see. I mean, the goal for all of it is, can we be more successful, happier people? You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm also a big fan of Whale Sync. That in fact, I don't know if we can include like links in the show notes after this, but there's this really fun YouTube video of one of the Whale Sync guys showing how you can do programmatic SEO that uses Webflow CMS and, you know, Builder plus Airtable plus ChatGPT to generate novel descriptions, and it just blew my mind. Like, you know, generate 500 unique custom programmatic landing pages in like 30 minutes or something, and that's like a whole new frontier in terms of and you know, because it's like it's encouraging to me and empowering to see you build Slater out in the open, because product development is really hard. It's like it's a whole
I have like so much empathy for the Webflow team through this, because, you know, I'm out here like let me tell you what you should be doing, and then I get in there and I'm like, oh, it's difficult.
No, it's I mean, just, you know, doing services work is a different, it's like a different part of your brain, I think, even than doing product work. And it's a real joy to work at Webflow. I go into, I am the dumbest person in the room. I mean, there's some smart people who are so good at what they do, and it's been really a pleasure to kind of watch up close. But you know, it's one thing to develop a product that's really great, that like works. Like, that's the hardest thing is, you know, make something people want and get them to pay for it is the other thing. So even if your app is really good and your product is like solving a real problem and scratching a real itch, like getting it out into the world is then a different skill set in terms of like, yes, you're great at doing product design and development, but like you said, that go-to-market strategy is like, how do I get it in front of people? How do I show them how it works? How do I price and package it effectively? How do I continue? It's not like an exam that you pass. It's a garden that you weed. Like you're continually having to revisit, are we getting in front of people? And I have to do the same tutorial 5 times, and you're writing blog posts and stuff. So that's it's like I said, it's encouraging to see you go through this like in a very public way, because it's easy to just look at these overnight successes overnight, where like you do some product and it gets launched first, top page on Product Hunt, and people are throwing money at you. But no, in reality, it's a real slog, and it's it might take a couple before you get like what was the there was a story I learned from the Angry Birds team. It was like a Finnish game development company. No, look this up. Someone can look this up while we're chatting on like Wikipedia or something. But I want to say that Angry Birds was the 37th game that they had developed. Like, of course, it became this like world devouring phenomenon, and cartoons and plush toys, and but can you imagine like that 29th game that you release and like no reaction, 30th, like, so to me that's a very like, keep at it. You never know what's gonna happen.
Well, and probably for a separate conversation, I'd love to go through some of our editing room floor things that just hadn't made it. Cool. There's a product that we started on 4 years ago called Marina. This was a contracting and estimating tool. Beautiful, really, really solid product. What we found was one, like we building up, I think, so for once you get into services, one of the things that kind of comes apparent is like it's not a creative business, it's a contract and numbers business, but most people don't understand the contracts and numbers, and it's an inflection point that you have to get over. And it's like something that we needed, and I think it's still something that's needed out there in the marketplace. But having like meeting customers where they are, it's like if you're too early, it's like you're still wrong. And so we were still too early there in terms of like, I think building a product that, it's like, okay, we have an audience within the Webflow community. What can people start to use today? And people weren't ready for that. Another product that we've built, it's actually an enterprise only product, which is WES. And so this is a deployment and staging environment specifically for Webflow enterprise customers that need to be able to deploy it, Azure, or need to be able to do like some very complicated, I would say like things that have to happen within their environment. But that's one that's like, we've actually made money on that product, and I'll say this, like we've only sold it with the Webflow enterprise team, but that's not one that we can just like our fate is very tied to like, okay, how are we selling this with Webflow, right? And so it's like that go-to-market then became more challenging. And then we actually, outside of West, then we built another one called Matt. So Matt's a migration automation tool. But then the migration automations, like it was just, we got really bogged down in like all the stuff that had to happen there. And anyway, but like now with Slater, like we've been able to have something that was just complicated enough that we could build with an audience. Something that we actually had a debate on at the beginning of this year is like, do we hire a product manager or do we hire a marketer? And so we actually made the call. Yeah. So we actually made the call to hire a marketer. So that's where Jack Redley came in. And, I was like, it doesn't matter how good our product is if no one knows about it and if we're not building it so tightly with the community. So that's where like, I saw Andrea's in here and, Jeff and like all these people, but like, it takes so much time to like individually start, like Jack does really like these great interviews, and then we're doing office hours once a week. And like so much of this stuff, you hear about things that like work on things that don't scale. Like, it doesn't scale is like office hours. It doesn't scale is like individual. But like those have been the conversations where we've learned the most. And I think we've been able to build kind of like goodwill. And so just like as people are thinking about, creating and launching and just like what is that inflection point of like how to start to break that out into market. There's no like go to market that's going to work for everybody. But just, I think, trying to have a deep sense of empathy and to like, listen and work with people and get out early. That's where we've experienced success. But again, like we still have it is such a long road to go to be able to have something that's going to be at break even, much less profitable.
How has so because
we're still here for it.
Because you had been working on Slater since this past spring, and I'm noticing a trend in your product name. So we've got Wes and Matt and Slater. These are all like boy names for babies. Essentially, you gotta.
Well, Marina. So.
Oh, that's true. There's a girl name. Okay, all right. There's a little representation there.
And Edgar Allan. So we do name products after people.
After people. Okay, so that's the clear trend. Yeah. So you launched this product. You're working on it. You're trying to get product market fit. You're looking for the right go-to-market strategy. You hired a marketer to develop it. You're doing things that don't scale, which for the folks on the call, that's a reference to Paul Graham, the venture capitalist and founder of Y Combinator. His advice was when you're just getting started with a product, do things that don't scale. And the canonical example is, I think the Wufoo team, they were a form builder. Every new person that signed up, they would write a handwritten card and mail it to them, which is a lovely touch and builds you loyalty, but that's not going to scale very long. But so let me ask you then, so the process of then taking this app, how has then using the Webflow app marketplace helped you in that? Like, what was the process like, first of all, to get it registered and published? And then secondly, what impact has that had in terms of exposure or in kind of like your own go-to-market strategy?
It's been fantastic, and we definitely saw an uptick of being within that marketplace. I would say though that it's like we're not leaning on that being the only channel. So we're looking at when we talk with our customers, we look at kind of a 3-channel approach. What is going to be our owned channel? What is going to be our earned channel? And what is going to be our paid channel? And so for things like our contest, like that's actually kind of, we would consider that as paid media. Because we're paying, we're trying to engage with people in a way. It's also a little bit of earned, but on owned, like that's our website, and within the app marketplace, it's kind of like I would say earned a bit. Being in the Webflow marketplace in a lot of different, it's like we have our agency profile. We work within the enterprise team, like now on the app marketplace. It's a fantastic platform, and Meg, who's on here, like she's worked with us, and like just the DevRel team has been amazing. But we can't fully rely on that because it's not a channel that we have full control over. So it's like we want to influence that channel. We want to be able to drive people to that channel, but it's kind of boots on the ground, like engaging with customers and looking at ways in which we can start to show the value. So for anyone that's like hoping like, oh, you just like get in there and turn the key and like you're done, it's good. It's very, very good. And as I said, like we've seen a huge uptick, but our best driver has been referrals, word of mouth. We've had incredible people that have been going and creating videos around like how they're using Slater, and maybe Jack can go in through a couple of those in the comments. Those have been our biggest drivers, and the benefit of the development or the Webflow team has been almost like, I would say, if I was to make an analogy, it's like somewhere between a big brother and a personal trainer, where we're getting kind of advice and guidance. Like they're like, hey, you got to have terms of service. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally need terms of service. And we were like, why you want to have that? But like, that's just something that I've always kind of ignored. And I'm married to a lawyer, so I should know better.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure. Yeah, Margaret's going to have some words.
Yeah. We've had strong conversations there. But I think that's the thing that's such a huge opportunity. And I would also say for anyone, because I was talking with a group yesterday that's in the app marketplace for Webflow, or sorry, the app ecosphere of Webflow, but isn't actually in the marketplace. And it sometimes can take a little bit of time. Like sometimes like you might submit something and not hear back. Like we actually submitted 2 applications we heard back on Slater. We didn't hear back on Wes, but it wasn't because like Wes was rejected. It was just like, that's just not what was going to be within the first release. And so I would say kind of be patient, with the team. Within the Webflow team, they're kind of getting going with this. There's lots of things that they're also going to be learning. And so as we're trying to ask our customers to be patient with us, I think for us to be patient with that team, who's, they've got a lot that, now they have like, 100 people that they're trying to go in and like kind of manage through. And, that'll take a little bit of time to just operationalize.
It's a lot of work, and it's a whole new, just talking about developing new skill sets and kind of pushing yourself in ways like, Webflow as a company grows, and, there are core competencies involved in, number one, API development, and number two, managing an ecosystem and developer relations and having a marketplace. And those are whole new, I'd say divisions, but like, areas of the company that are relatively new. And the team are doing such an amazing job, but it's like, we're just getting started, and there's going to be lots to learn. Yeah. It's crawl, walk, run kind of thing. And I, obviously can't speak to any kind of, like roadmap or future plans, but I can say that we are actively and aggressively courting, developers, be like, hey, please come and develop for the platform, and try to unblock them and help educate them and kind of do some things too. And so I think it's just the very beginning. It's early days still, and I'm excited to see what people create with the tools. And again, just to use that iPhone analogy from the outset, it's like, the iPhone by itself is great. Like, and I was there day one, June 2007, in line. I paid that full price, and then people complained, and I got like $150 credit to the Apple Store that I used to buy some headphones. But it's like, I didn't need an app store. Like, it was just so good by itself. Of course, the phone is that much more useful with an app store kind of ecosystem. So as valuable and as powerful and as groundbreaking as Webflow is and has been, it's like, I am so excited to see what comes in the next 6 months, the next year, all of these itches to be scratched. I just saw a comment, Adrian said, I wanted to rebuild an old Flash game in Slater, but haven't had the time. Adrian, I'm rooting for you. I would love to see, there's all these old Flash games that used to exist, and you could go and play them, and they're lost to the dustbin of history. And how cool would it be if we could sort of like resurrect some of those? And to your point about sort of like marrying the Flash community or traditional developer community with the no code and like creating these bridges. And I think Slater is an excellent step, towards that goal.
Yeah. Thank you. As I said, we're learning a lot, and it's been amazing to just kind of be a part of this launch. I do want to take just a couple minutes. Is there questions that anyone has before we sign out here? And I know, Nathan, you're probably going to be popping to your next, who knows what, call. But thanks for joining in. Any last questions in here? Give everyone a second. And Nathan, to what you were just talking about there, the thing that I would probably kind of add to that comment is it's a totally new way for, I think, Webflow to work. And for a long time, I felt, I'm like, put me in the game, coach. Like, and I'm ready to build. Like, I see opportunities here. And there wasn't that opportunity for a while. Now there is that opportunity. It's going to be, a change around just like how the company is operating, like who we're working with, who we're collaborating with. And back to the iPhone analogy, is people want to think about like what's next. If you look at Apple's stock price over the last 20 years, it was like flat. Should have bought some. I should not have bought that monitor.
You and me both.
Yeah. And then like the iPhone comes out and you see an uptick. But what's really amazing is like when the App Store launched, like that's when it starts to go parabolic, because they were able to balance like that little bit of control, but all of a sudden like this wild amount of extensibility. And so that's my hope for Webflow as well, is like now that there is this surface and so many ways to build on top of the platform, that we're starting to see more and more of an uptick here.
Well, and I'll say my grandma used to say, you can't force a rose to bloom. So, things happen when they happen, and we will all be the beneficiaries. I do have to run. I have a hard stop, but what a pleasure, Mason. Thanks for inviting me. I think
this is
the last
super
time
fun.
we get to chat, and I hope this was useful to the folks on the call. I hope you don't regret your last hour, but in any case, I've had a blast, and it's been a pleasure being with you. So thanks to all of you. And yeah, I might double my LinkedIn follower count to 12 after this. So that'd be great. So
yeah, well, I'd love to do it again, Nathan. It's super fun. You always have really great insights and stuff. So, and for everyone who joined, this has been awesome. Thanks for all of the activity and questions and comments. So we'll talk more. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.